Hello, my name is Eric, and I'm a geek. Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Casual Geek. I'm your host, Eric Smith, and take a look, take it in. This is the only time you're ever going to see this with my fancy Spider-Man tie. I thought it would be kind of funny to have a show called The Casual Geek and wear a button-down shirt and a tie for the first episode. Of course, I'm not wearing any pants, so I'm half casual here. Alright, so this is the first episode, and what I want to do here is make this kind of an introductory thing. I'm going to talk about where the idea came from, where the title came from, and tell you a little bit about what I hope to accomplish and what you can expect, and just throw some ideas out there. I'm hoping for some feedback from people. So first of all, the Casual Geek. It's something that popped into my head not too long ago when I was watching something else on YouTube, and people were getting really intense about certain things. I think in this case it was a movie. I don't remember specifically what it was. I want to say it was the instance when someone was talking about the casting of a character in a movie, and they were concerned that if the actor that they were talking about was cast in this role, it would confuse people because this particular actor had played a superhero in another movie. And they seem to think, they're not giving people a lot of credit. They seem to think people would be confused if you had the same actor playing two different superheroes. And that sort of led into the whole Quicksilver thing, where you have Quicksilver in X-Men Days of Future Past, and Quicksilver, a different version of Quicksilver, in Avengers Age of Ultron. And they were afraid that would confuse people. I don't think so. I think that's looking at things a little too deeply. So that might be the instance that made me think some people take these things way too seriously. Another instance from a little further back, I was talking about Star Trek with someone I worked with at my old job, and this guy is a huge fan of Star Trek, the original series. And I brought up the J.J. Abrams movie. This was when the first one had just come out. And this guy refused to watch the movie because it just deviates far too much from the original. He'd heard about the new movie, and none of the stuff in there happened in the original series. It doesn't make any sense. And I said, yeah, but they clearly state very early in the movie that this is a separate timeline. There's a divergence point, and it creates an alternate universe, and so it doesn't have to follow exactly those things that happen in the original series. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is what the series was. The movies should be like that. And I think that's a little intense. I happen to like the new Star Trek movies. I could get into the pros and cons, but maybe I'll save that for another show. But I'm a huge fan myself of the original series. I grew up watching it, but really, settle down, folks. And this same guy felt that any movie about the Hulk should be just like the TV show, because that's what he knows. That's what he grew up with. To him, that's the original Hulk. I pointed out that the TV show was quite different than the comic book, and if we're going to follow his rules, then it should be exactly like the original comics. He also thinks that Iron Man should take place during Vietnam, because that's when it took place. And apparently Batman and Superman should all take place back in the 40s, 30s, and 40s, whenever that stuff came out. So that's a little too intense. I'm much more casual than that in my geekdom. I do have some strong feelings about certain things, like 28 Days Later is not a zombie movie. Stop saying it's a zombie movie. But for the most part, come on, people. It's comic books. It's movies. Yeah, there's some great stuff, and we love to love it. but none of it's real. None of it really matters. Let's just settle down, step back, take a breath. There's no need to get so upset about these things. Strong feelings are fine, but crazy feelings are crazy. So anyway, that's where the Casual Geek, the name, came from. I just thought, some people take it too far. I like to think I don't do that, so this is going to be a more casual kind of show for a more casual kind of guy in his tie. Only time you're going to see this. So what this show is basically just going to be me talking about stuff, geek stuff, whether it's comic books, movies, TV, books, games, anything. There's plenty of really cool games I can talk about, and of course, the news just keeps coming with all the superhero movies and TV shows and casting announcements. I'm not going to be breaking any stories, no breaking news here, but you will get my reactions to some of the stories that I hear, some of the news that I pick up. So there's that. That's basically what this is going to be, me just jawing about this stuff. And occasionally I might have somebody join me to talk about different things. I know plenty of people that are fans of the comic book movies or Star Wars movies or whatever, and maybe I'll bring somebody in and we can have a nice heated discussion about that sort of thing. There's a cat over there in the corner, and maybe he'll join one of the discussions. I don't know. But that's basically what this is going to be, just me talking about stuff. I know that at the time of this recording, Ant-Man comes out in just a few days, and I'm definitely going to go and see that. I'm most likely going to want to talk about that, and that may lead into a larger discussion about the Marvel Cinematic Universe as a whole. So that's basically that. Now I'm still debating on different formats and things. This video is just going to go onto YouTube, but I'm considering doing this as a podcast. I haven't decided yet. One, I don't know exactly how to do that. Two, I don't know the pros and cons, if it's going to be worth it to do it as a podcast or just throw it up on YouTube. I don't even know if anybody's going to be interested in this, so we'll see. I haven't decided exactly how long these videos are going to be. Do I do 1 half-hour video every week, 2 half-hour videos per week, 1 hour-long video per week? Should it depend on what I actually have to say, what I want to talk about? I haven't made all of these decisions yet. I think I'm going to start with half an hour or less once a week, unless something comes up that I really want to talk about while it's fresh in my mind. Then I might throw some other stuff up there. Again, I'm not sure how exactly the podcasting thing goes, if I need to actually set a date and time that it's going to be up and a length. I assume so, in which case I'll really have to buckle down and make these decisions. Am I going to do half an hour Tuesday at 8 o'clock or an hour Wednesdays at 9 o'clock? I have a very odd work schedule, so that may affect how I can do this and the choices that I make as far as that goes. I work nights from 10 o'clock until 7 in the morning. The only day I always have off is Wednesday. So I'd hate to say, okay, this is going to be, I'm going to post every Thursday at this time and then not be able to do it because I have to work, or because I'm sleeping, because I'm going to have to go to work. So again, decisions that will be made eventually. Excuse me. So I think that's the basics. I'm going to be very casual about my geekdom. I don't think you're going to hear me ranting and raving too much about anything. And it's at this point, it's just going to be me sitting here talking about stuff. Those of you who watch my low-budget review show will recognize the background. And that's because that's where my chair is. Maybe I'll take the computer and go somewhere else from time to time to break things up a little bit. Otherwise, this is what you're going to see. The world's greatest quilt. This is my Marvel Zombies t-shirt quilt. You can't see the whole thing, obviously. There's some down behind the chair. You can see Captain America over here. And if I go the other way, that is another Captain America. Look at that. And then you've got up there, there's some Venom and the Spider-Man wedding and Galactus. And I'll tell you a little bit about this quilt, since this is the Casual Geek. Marvel Zombies, I thought, was a fantastic concept, and for the most part, a really good series of mini-series. The first mini-series I thought was fantastic. The second was pretty good. Army of Darkness versus Marvel Zombies, or Ash versus Marvel Zombies, whatever they called it, I loved. I think it was the fourth one that I thought was kind of weak. The one that had the red mist of blood kind of floating around, and it had sentience and was attacking people, whatever it was. Thought that was kind of weak, but I thought it picked up again after that. So I really enjoyed the Marvel Zombies series. I had the hardcover book that had all the cover paintings, because the artwork, Arthur Suydam, I don't know how you say his name, I believe it's Suydam. I don't have that in front of me because I wasn't planning on talking about this. But anyway, beautiful, beautiful covers. Basically zombie versions of classic covers. As you can see right over here, that's obviously you can't see it very well, but that's the zombie version of the classic Secret Wars cover. So loved the artwork. When they started coming out with the t-shirts, I was picking up every one that I could find. And there are a few, such as not the Wolverine, actually, no, the wedding one, which is above Wolverine there. I never wore that to work. I believe this Captain America I never wore to work. I know the Secret Wars I never wore to work, because I was working at a factory and my clothes got shredded. The bottom 6 inches or so, of whatever I was wearing would just get torn up by the steel that I was working with. So my t-shirts were getting torn up to the point where I couldn't really wear them to work anymore, because there'd be huge gaping holes in the stomach area. And so I decided, my mother's a quilter, and she'd been talking about trying to make a t-shirt quilt. So I said, hey, why don't you take my Marvel Zombies t-shirts, make them into a quilt. So if you look at the top there, those are 3 little tiny Ghost Rider pictures. That shirt was so torn up that those 3 little patches were all she could use. The Galactus has the picture had the Fantastic Four at the bottom, but they got all shredded. So the Galactus, and there's a Silver Surfer, I don't know if you can see it there. That was all that could be used. The Venom he's beating up Spider-Man, but Spider-Man got shredded. So that's why only some of them have really full pictures there. The ones that I didn't wear to work. I think that's Spider-Man right there, which I love. I don't think I ever wore that one to work. Not that they weren't all great, but my favorites I didn't want to get damaged at all. But anyway, so I took these shredded t-shirts, and they were beat to hell, and my mother was kind enough to make this quilt for me, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. Obviously, I've got it hanging on the wall. I just think it's fantastic. And so, there you go. That's my background for these videos, at least for right now. And speaking of background, I'm going to tell you a little bit about my geek background. I've been a comic book fan for as long as I can remember. Some of my earliest memories are of comic books. When I was in first grade, we took a trip to Colorado, and I remember stopping at a truck stop to get something to eat, and they had a spinner rack with comic books on it, and I was able to pick up an issue of The Brave and the Bold, which featured Batman and Green Arrow. When I was a little kid, my father would take me to Eddie's cigar store where he would pick up his tobacco products, and if I was lucky, if I'd been a good kid, he would give me a quarter. And back then, that would get you a whole comic book. I think I got Spider-Man most often at the time. But, so I've been a huge comic book fan forever. I used to write and draw my own comics when I was a little kid. I'd take notebook paper, lined notebook paper. I'd have one picture per page. But I would draw them up, and I would have a little story, and it would be about 10 pages long or so. Story might be stretching it. But I did put these together, and I'd staple the pages together, and I actually sold some for about a quarter a piece. I hope DC and Marvel don't sue me, because they were Batman comics and Spider-Man comics and The Flash. So hopefully, if DC and Marvel want their piece of that $1.25 I think that I made total, I'd be happy to split that with them. Just always been a huge fan of comic books. I grew up reading pulp fiction with Tarzan and Conan and The Shadow and all of that great stuff. I used to have one wall was completely plastered with Frank Frazetta pictures. Pictures painted by Frank Frazetta, not pictures of Frank Frazetta. They had a couple of picture books at the time with all his work in it, and I wouldn't do this nowadays, but back then I just tore those out and put them up on my wall, and the entire wall was just Frank Frazetta stuff. Just a wonderful artist. So this has always been a huge part of my life. We had, on Saturdays, we had a show called Superhost, and he would show old science fiction movies and old monster movies. I remember watching The Blob and Invasion of the Saucer Men and all of those great flicks. And on Friday nights, late night, we had Big Chuck and Houlihan, which became Big Chuck and Little John, and they would show basically the same kind of movies, but they would also have these little sort of mini marathons that would go on, where for 5 or 6 weeks they would show all the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes movies, and then for the next 5 or 6 weeks it would be Hammer horror Dracula movies, and then for the next however many weeks it was the Charlie Chan movies, and then the next 5 or 6 weeks we'd be back to the old science fiction and horror. Universal Monsters, they would do all of those. That's where I fell in love with Frankenstein and Creature from the Black Lagoon, my absolute favorite. But I got to see The Invisible Man and Dracula, all those classics. And again, I was watching all this from the youngest age and reading horror. One of the earliest books I remember owning was an anthology called Shutters, and the only things I remember is it had The Monkey's Paw, which terrified me, and a wonderful story, I believe, written by Robert Bloch. Somebody told me this because I can't remember the name of the story, but it was about a kid with an abusive father or stepfather or somebody, and the kid ends up making a voodoo doll, and he tells somebody at the end of the story, no, this is some candy I made, it's something to eat, and he bites the head off of it, and then there's a scream from another room, and as a little kid that was really creepy. So yeah, again, been a fan of this stuff forever. I used to have, I wish I had so much of this stuff. I had all the original Star Wars action figures, and I don't know who remembers when Marvel Comics, I don't know about DC, but Marvel would put out these huge comic books, kind of like a giant digest. They were, I don't know if a foot and a half by 2 feet or 2 feet by 3 feet. They were huge, and they did, some of them were just reprints of stories, but they did Star Wars, when they got the rights to Star Wars and they did the adaptation of the movie, they put out one of these giant versions of it, and I had that. I had all the models. just everything. And I had all these board games, old superhero-based board games. I had a Marvel Heroes one that was sort of a checkers chess kind of thing. And I had a Swamp Thing board game. And, of course, if anything had Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, any of these characters, I wanted to have it. I used to have these records that came with a book, and you could read the story while someone on the record was reading the story. It's just the kind of thing we had back then. So I like to think I have a little geek cred. Again, I grew up watching the original Star Trek, and I was there when Next Generation came in. I was actually in the Air Force when Next Generation started, and we would actually get together. A whole bunch of us would get together to watch it. I mean, we were super excited for a new Star Trek series. I was there when Star Wars came out. Saw the original 3 in the theater, and I saw the first of the prequels in the theater, and that hurt so much that I have seen the other 2, but I waited till they were on TV. Oh, man. Now I'm just sad. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Saw that in the theater a few times. So I grew up with this stuff. I'm a huge horror geek. Yeah, I've been, again, watching horror movies all my life, reading horror all my life. Love H.P. Lovecraft, Edgar Allan Poe. Not a huge fan of Stephen King. Some of his stuff I love. Some of his stuff I think is boring as hell. Used to be a big fan of Dean Koontz until I felt he just got repetitive and boring. But a lot of his early stuff I really enjoyed. Clive Barker, love his stuff. I've read some Peter Straub. Those are the names that are going to be familiar, I think, to most people. But then you get into the authors that should be household names, like Brian Keene and Ronald Malfi, and for people that like hardcore horror, Edward Lee and Rath James White, Hunter Shea, a lot of new up-and-coming authors, Adam Cesare, James A. Moore, who does horror, and he's writing fantasy now, just fantastic stuff. Christopher Golden is a New York Times bestseller, but I don't know anybody that's heard of the guy, unfortunately. People should be reading this stuff. I've been reading it forever. Like I said, fantasy, horror, all of that stuff. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm into. That's the kind of stuff I grew up with. So that's the kind of stuff I'm going to be talking about. If I didn't think it would make you want to puke, I would spin my computer around and show you everything in this room. Just this one room. I've got a bookshelf over here that's got a bunch of horror and some comedy horror and some more horror, and then some Sherlock Holmes and Fletch. Love the Fletch books. Most people only know Fletch, it seems, from the Chevy Chase movie back in the day, but it was based on a series of books which are absolutely fantastic. And I've got some pulp up there, and I've got a Terminator skull that I just got from Loot Crate. And then, oh look, more books. And there's Fu Manchu and Doc Savage and my Philosophy and Pop Culture series. Not my series. My books from the Philosophy and Pop Culture series. And then a bunch of just toys. I love the blind boxes that come out. I've got a bunch from The Walking Dead and some Doctor Who. And I've got a TARDIS. And then there's all my Star Trek books. And there's a Godzilla that makes some noise. And just books stacked up, literally stacked up to that far away from the ceiling. And then I've got a Mjolnir and a Star-Lord figure and an evil Spock. And just posters that I've picked up from different conventions and things. And 1, 2, 3, 4 of those are based on H.P. Lovecraft stuff. And there's some Doctor Who stuff. And then, oh look, more books over here. And more figures, my Star Wars figures and Marvel stuff. A lot of Funko Pops. And oh, more books over there with more toys and stuff on it. And all my games and my Xbox and my Blu-rays and DVDs and my video games and more games. I really need more space for my games. I have way too many games for the limited amount of space that I have. And I'll be talking about a lot of those games. This seems a little rambly because I didn't have anything specific to talk about for this episode. I'm trying to see how 30 minutes feels. As I'm recording this, I'm watching, there's a little time clock up in the corner here. So I'm trying to get a little feel for this. Maybe I'll go shorter than 30 minutes, although it seems like, I don't know. Can you have a shorter podcast? Is 15 minutes enough? Or does it have to be 30? Normally, I'll have a subject that I'm going to come in and talk about. I'll have notes. You'll see me glancing over at the side of the computer where my notes are. So I keep everything focused. I'm going to try to keep focused anyway. I don't know if I will succeed. No more button-down shirt and tie. No more... Well, there may be more Spider-Man because I have plenty of Spider-Man t-shirts, but no Spider-Man tie. Like I said, take this in, enjoy it while you can, because I find this very uncomfortable. Actually, it's the shirt itself isn't that uncomfortable, but it is a little small. I got this shirt a long time ago, and I'm kind of choking on it, having it buttoned up all the way. So, yeah, there will be no more button-down shirts and ties. Maybe I'll throw a tie on with a t-shirt, but that's as far as I'm going to go. Alright, I'm at the 26-minute mark. It really seems like I've been rambling a lot. But again, this is just an introduction. So, please, 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 comment down below. Let me know if you have any interest in seeing me do a show like this, where I talk about this kind of stuff. Let me know if you have any ideas about format, how long the show should be, whether I should bother with a podcast or just keep it on YouTube or do both. If there's any subjects you want me to talk about, I'm not sure why anybody cares about my opinion, but I'm going to share it anyway. So, excuse me. If there's anything at all you want to discuss or want to hear me discuss, please let me know. Just flood my comment section with comments. Hopefully nothing bad, but if you have constructive criticism, please let me know. Normally I'd say the comments are open to spoilers, but I don't think we're at any point where there would be spoilers to talk about. I say that in my book review section because sometimes people like to spoil the books that people haven't read yet. So anyway, please, please, please comment. Let me know what you think about the whole idea of this. And please like, share, and subscribe. If nobody's interested, I may do it anyway because it doesn't cost anybody anything. But I would like to, I don't know, build a fan base of some sort because I really love talking about this stuff. And, again, I'm looking at the time clock. I'm at 28 minutes. Does a podcast or something like this have to be a solid 30 minutes and that's it? I don't know how it works. I've been doing a little bit of research on how to do it, but I haven't found all the answers yet. So there you have it. This was the first very rambling episode of the Casual Geek. It will be even more casual in attire next time. But the the show itself, I think, will be a little more straightforward. Again, most likely I'm going to be talking about Ant-Man, so since I'm going to go see that movie this weekend, as soon as it opens up Friday. If I didn't have to work Thursday, I would find myself one of those special Thursday sneak preview screenings and go and see it then, but I do have to work Thursday night, so it's going to have to wait until Friday for me to see Ant-Man. I'm very excited about this. I'm a huge fan of Ant-Man. I like Scott Lang, the character. Iron Man used to be my favorite comic, and there was a time when Ant-Man was almost sort of see, I'm at the end of the video, and that's when my brain breaks down. Ant-Man was, he spent a lot of time in the Iron Man comic at one point. So I became a big fan of Ant-Man as well. So that's what the next one's going to be about, at least a good portion of it will be about the movie and about Ant-Man. Now we're coming up on 30 minutes. It's actually going to be a little more than 30 with the introduction that I'm going to tack on to the beginning of this. So, this is the Casual Geek. I am the Casual Geek, and I hope to see you next time.